right, I'm going to talk a couple minutes on ADHD. We don't really have. I've got this funny exercise that I like to start with that I've done, and we don't have quite enough people, but you can imagine. I'm going to describe it. Can you? I got some yarn here, and I did this. I used to do like foster care trainings in rural Missouri. So you got farmers and good old boys, come into these things. And so I did this, got them in a circle, and I made them introduce themselves, and I would throw the yarn to them, and then I would just be tugging and pulling on it and telling them to hurry and going back and forth. And I brought it to them and we're going around. There's 12 people. Like the first guy is like really annoyed about halfway through, and he finally just went and snapped the rope in between us. And I'm like, yeah, that's what happened. So I want you to think they're doing everything in their power to interact, and all these interactions, and they're, if they end up breaking this relationship with you, and then they don't get a relationship with their friend over here because they couldn't pay attention enough, and it's a bad cycle when they cut their network down just because they can't attend and can't, or they're just annoying because they come so many times with the same thing, right? Like, I need this, oh, I'm done with that, I'm like, I'm ready for the next one. I'm like, dude, I need the thing. And that ends up damaging relationships. And that's why, when I found this ADHD motto, I just love it. It's got to be fun. If it's not fun, it's got to be moving. Oh, wait. Yeah, it's got to be moving. If it's not moving, it may as well be angry. Any of you deal with ADHD, that is what happened. I'm frustrated with you guys. This isn't fun. It's boring. Like, I literally sat on, we're doing certain parent-child training, interactive child training, where people like watch us work with our 4-year-old and tell us and help us how to do it. But today was essentially a 45-minute lecture on the materials, and I was just about to go bonkers. Like, I can read it, not saying anything that I'm not reading. So I know my own ADHD plays into it. What are the odds this is going to move forward? I don't know. There we go. The downside is, or not the downside, everybody kind of knows what the downside is. And but there are some real advantages to ADHD. High energy, creativity, intuitiveness, resourcefulness, tenacity, hardworking, never say die approach, warm-heartedness, flexible, trusting attitude, easy to forgive, sensitivity, loyal, good sense of humor, ability to take risks. Like, what we say about people these days is they wear their emotions on their sleeve. That is an ADHD person, which means they can get hurt really, really easily, super sensitive. But they also can intuit what's going on around them if they can get their focus on it enough. And so sometimes they've done so much damage, or they couldn't work in the classroom, that you don't see these advantages. But they are there, and they're very, very creative people that are ADHD if you can find a way to channel it in any way, shape, or form. I don't know if any of you guys aren't struggling with it. There's criteria for hyperactivity, impulsivity. There's the combined type where they're both hyperactive and have attention deficit. There's predominantly inattentive, and the research shows that girls that get diagnosed with this are more the inattentive part. So they look like they're being very, very compliant, and they have literally no idea what's going on because they're daydreaming, they're out and about, but they're not moving, so they're not disrupting class or something like that. On the other hand, boys tend to end up with the hyperactive impulsivity type. And you can have both, which is really challenging. So inattention, some examples of that become fails to give close attention to detail, careless work, trouble holding attention on tasks or play activities, often does not seem to listen when spoken directly to, often does not follow through on instructions. Sadly enough, these same exact criteria can also be there for trauma and for PTSD. I mean, and so some other areas you can have the same thing and not know which one it is. And so just working with ADHD is not gonna get it there if there's trauma involved. Often forgetful, loses things necessary for tasks. Now I'm reading it and thinking my 11-year-old is close. And then hyperactivity, fidgets, taps hands, squirms. I mean, I literally still rock a table all the time. Lead seat. So, again, our 4-year-old, we just got diagnosed with this. We started, you add trauma in that and some neglect early on, plus actual probably ADHD. It's quite a mix when they're looking for a dopamine hit. They're looking for something just from their surroundings. So they're picking on a brother, like, if you're not quite exciting enough for me, I'm going to go make something happen. And they are very much. We finally, I think we've gotten to a dose of medicine. And just this week, I've had both daycare and taekwondo be like, so many less squirms, so much more attention, And so this hyperactivity thing is challenging, and it's really what causes the damage in relationships. Pretty sure that's the end of the slide. So, the goal here is just, I want to share that. Are there any questions on ADHD or your experience, or otherwise I'll open it up to conversation. I've already bored him.
Do you see a lot of times with ADHD and
Yes.
And also, when you were mentioning your own personal experience going through this, are you also seeing the children that are being diagnosed right now with ADHD?
So the magnitude is ridiculous, and I think some of it is so much is moving, so much. Like our TV's done some damage because images change so often, and you can literally watch the progression of we used to be okay with females, and that was amazing, and then it kind of had to go to Twitter. You get 144 characters, and now, I mean, honestly, they don't even want that. They don't want to reach 144 characters anymore. So I think there's some, I don't know, the one doctor, one of the things is that if you actually try some kind of stimulant and it doesn't make a difference, it's probably not ADHD. That makes sense? Which means then it's based on something else. That they're not getting enough sleep, they're not getting, they're not putting in effort, they don't believe it matters to them, they don't really feel like they have boundaries. So that's kind of the second part of that question. The first part is, let's go back to this example of tossing, like I'm interacting with people, but I'm using a string and I put it out there because this is just who I am and I'm so raw or I'm so over the top kind of thing, and somebody breaks off a relationship. It's not like I don't notice that, like, so, wow, now what do I do in my next relationship? Because I can't really control myself yet, but now I'm a little fearful of how this is going to work. I've now been told I can't remember my stuff, I can't get my assignment done. So you can see, and so I think there's a pathway just from the experience of ADHD into anxiety. I also think you're revving so fast that, when I think about that advisor voice, like a normal person, let's just imagine a horrible thought goes through their head 5 times a minute. Okay, and they're still beating them up pretty bad. And ADHD, who's got this loop that's so much faster in their head, it goes through 20 times. And so I think there's direct connect between ADHD anxious about the world around them because they can't seem to fit in at the pace it's going, and then straight into depression. And if you start treating depression, you may not even be getting close to what the actual issue is. So I think part of that piecing out what it is, but I also believe anxiety is that the progression in adolescence of anxiety is depression. I just they get scared of doing stuff, they stop doing stuff, and they recognize they aren't doing stuff, and they feel bad about it, and that feeling bad, like anxious, and then it turns into depression. And now I don't even have the energy to try and do things. A couple of other people join us, but I think that's a great question. I think that's, I think there is a definite progression to them.
After what we had, during pretty certain never had behavior problems. This was but when I look at that list, and I know these things.
Yeah.
It checks all the boxes. The inability to complete things and just regard and the hyperactivity. I know sometimes the hyperactivity does get to behavior level. We're never there. It's more like this.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that worries me. Addressed or dealt with that. We've never tried to, say, medicate that. You're talking about a stimulant. I don't know.
He tried some substances, hasn't he? Like for smoking or something. I don't remember, but I thought I'd remembered that. He's trying stuff that, I figured out the caffeine calms me. Because just imagine all of this. You were doing those the hyperactivity, and brain is literally doing the same thing. All right, so it's not just the body. Your brain is focusing on 5 different things at once, and hearing this voice in the background, and then thinking about this, and the ability to organize and send it in a singular direction is the hard part. But then you throw in, they missed. I only heard 2/3 of the instructions, and I was trying, and so I still failed this task. Even though I was trying. That's a very discouraging thing. And it's only kind of hit me recently that my progression, I had all of those, I'm probably emotion mind in my own language, but I had put so much structure on myself and made myself so much more rational to control. Some of it was my parents' disorganization and some of the ways they couldn't handle things that I was reacting against. But I just put so much structure in place. I thought I was a rational being. Really, what I was just doing was suppressing and ignoring my emotions. So it turns out doing that for long enough ends up with this pit of anger you've got to figure out how to process and deal with. That's good. Anything else? Those are good questions.
It's all just kind of making sense. I think everything that happened, decline of self-confidence. Like you can't see sudden this confident kid.
And sometimes I think our elementaries do kids a little bit of a disservice. Everybody has to know their alphabet. It's not like you stop, because if you get a C in algebra class, there's literally 1/3 of the material you're probably not actually competent in. But nobody lets a first grader not know their alphabet. And so they all end up like, well, we all got it, we did that, we got, and we got all the pieces, and nobody's allowed to actually not, we don't notice the not failing or the challenges. And then it gets a lot harder. And there is I don't know, massive, much bigger than when I was there in 5th and 6th grade, of them to be more responsible for themselves in middle schools. and different features. You don't have the same eyes upon them all the time. And so, all right, it wasn't quite annoying enough in choir, and not quite enough enough in math, and not quite enough here for anyone to pick a teacher whatsoever. Yeah, I think that happens regularly. All right, so I've been talking about ADHD, and we've had some people join us. Any questions? Yeah, Susana's raising her hand.
Yeah. Jason, I've noticed with my daughter Lucia, which you and I have discussed, I notice just, I mean, she's a junior in high school, and I'm just kind of starting to see the symptoms. But when I look back, I can see how this probably started in late middle school. Is that common? But up until then, I can't see a single symptom. But then again, now that I think I know what we're dealing with, I go back probably 3.5 years and go, oh, that's kind of when this started. But is that common for it to be starting later in life versus a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old?
It depends on what it is. It may not. I mean, we're talking about ADHD. Could you guys? That I would say I've now had 350 families come through this program, and if 280 of them haven't said, "Well, I started seeing things in middle school." I mean, like middle school is just such a challenge. All right, and so whether there's an actual ADHD or depression or disorder, the challenges that come with that, if they're not prepared for it, or you don't notice it soon enough, or it's not drastic enough, it still turns into that advisor not liking themselves. All right. And so they beat themselves up. And I think that happens a lot more. And then it comes, if you're beating yourself up about, if I'm avoiding failure, it looks just like anxiety because I'm still avoiding, right? If and then I'm not doing schoolwork and I don't want to do schoolwork, and it's just a cyclical process. So I don't, there may have been pieces there, and I don't know. I've got an 11-year-old, so I'm just trying to like what pieces of how to handle life are not getting put into place right there, at that same age, and how do you even gauge that? I think is a harder question for like. So going back, I would also argue, if you remember my description of biology and environment coming together, we don't know what it is. We can't go back, but you could try some kind of stimulant. Do you, if they're revving at all and you give them some caffeine and they say that calms them at all, then you've got a pretty good biological component to play with there. But she's 16 and it started in middle school. There is some definitely, because if you're beating yourself up in your own head, every one of those thoughts is getting in the way of anybody else putting information in. So you're not attending to everything you should be attending to. What you are attending to are that you're trying to get out of pain or suffering or away from whatever is not going well. And I would argue it ends up looking a lot the same, and that most of us have probably biological predisposition to more than ever displays itself. But if that situation sets itself up, then it ends up becoming more drastic than it would be in a young person who doesn't have any predisposition towards something. Is that helpful at all?
Yeah, it is. And I had another question about, I'll post it, but maybe somebody else, I can't even see how many people are around. So I was curious about just treatment. Is medication the only way to treat this? Medication therapy?
ADHD?
Yeah.
No, what you're really wanting to work on is executive functioning. All right. I would argue I don't like to go to meds first. And when I was younger, as a younger counselor, I'd be like, I hate meds. But then the young people I worked with couldn't function at all. And I finally got like, all right, they have a significant use to help set a foundation that they can actually function. And set the example that my supervisor taught me was like, if our brain's a lot like concrete, and it's mixed. If it's getting mixed up and it's not working well, and you just dump it somewhere, all you've got is this big blob that's not functioning for anything. On the other hand, if you can put the wood in place and you put a framework in place, and then you dump the concrete, you've got a really useful structure. And I would argue that medication is usually a lot like putting those boards in place to allow the other things to happen, the work that needs to be done. And I'll tell you, my professors agreed, because I actually put together a medication manual when I was doing my master's work from the kids I was working with. And it was meant to be very targeted. It wasn't meant to be comprehensive. But every one of my professors is like, where's the behavioral training? Where's the structural stuff? Where's the actual like life change and routine structure that should go with it? And I'm like, 100% agree with that. We all know I had to eat a mid kind of thing to graduate kind of stuff. So I think there's different structures that can go into place. Like chess, I really believe in the game of chess. Like I'm teaching my boys the game of chess for executive function. In that you have to play it well, you have to start thinking about multiple options, and you have to think steps in advance. Those are the things that help you overcome unstructured mental, just unorganized thinking. Does that make sense? So I know you looked at brain balance. They're doing a lot of those kind of how to get your brain to work and be in sync. So there are strategies that don't involve medication, but I don't think there's any. And especially at 16, you're not looking at like, so ADHD has a side effect of stunting growth because of the stimulant and the Ritalin if you start it young. All right. But it doesn't stunt it forever. It just stunts it. It just slows it down a little bit. So they catch up later on in life. I'd be very careful that the side effects, you're just looking at side effects and stuff if I were going to look at medication.
Okay. And do people outgrow this?
That's what I was just going to ask.
Do they outgrow it?
Please say yes.
Well, that's a great question. So we know brain development shows that you don't fully have a fully functioning frontal lobe until at least 25. There's a substantial amount of research that even says it's 29. We know for a fact that our brains and our gray matter actually develops all the way into our, like, as long as you're using it in a productive way. So there's always chances for it to grow out. But so a symptom of being a teenager is somewhat ADHD.
Right. Hoping, right?
And so that's just another one to say you might not have seen it when they were younger, but then they get their hormones kick in and literally it comes across as lots of disorders. I fully believe I could take any teen, pick 5 moments from their life and diagnose them as borderline. like if I just look at these 5 points, and borderline is, as far as I'm concerned, is like one of the most horrendous disorders there is. But that doesn't make all of them borderline. It just makes them in this particular moment they registered on the scale kind of thing. So do they grow out of it? Yes, there is a high likelihood. The challenge with it is the impulsivity that's there. How good are they at doing things? Are they safe to drive? Are they organized enough to drive and do some of the other tasks? That would be the stuff I'd be like, what's the safety plan? Yeah. So there's a good potential that they'll grow out of a lot of it, just maybe not all of it. I would still say I actually struggle with sleep because if I get too much, then I'm hyperactive and it's hard for me to get things done. And or I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm ready to go and I get a bunch done and then 2 days later I'm done. I mean, like, I don't want to be the guy that says balance is the most important thing, but balance is good.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah. Jess, Nicole, Julie, any questions? You've all got your mics off. I'm hoping you can hear us. Checking to see if there's any.
No questions from me at this point. Susana really asked a question that I had, which is I also have a senior in high school who is now being assessed through Children's Mercy for ADHD, and I'm just so curious how we could have gotten to this point and not have. I mean, I have a similar story. I'm kind of looking back and seeing the signs that might have been manifesting along the way, but we never had any indication from educators or counselors or other medical professionals who were involved in her care. And so I've just I know that she has anxiety and has some anxiety rooted manifestations, but ADHD is a new one that just came up, and so that assessment has just begun, and most of what I hear is about that in younger children.
Yeah, they've actually raised in the DSM-5, they've raised the age criteria higher than it used to be. It used to be before 7, now it's before 12. I think that's a fair question because as far as I'm concerned, adolescent anxiety means their thoughts are going faster than they can handle them in some cases, which is going to, again, look just like inattention because what you're attending to is inside your own head more than what's outside of you. So, of course, it looks like inattention on the outside. And I just think there's so much. We use a concept here in our program of an advisor and this inner voice. And if something has happened over time to cause that to be a negative kind of filter that you think your own thoughts beat you up, that is phenomenally damaging. And I think that is hitting so many more of our young people than even, and I think it looks a lot the same. I don't want to pay attention to this because I haven't been successful at paying attention, so I'm going to fail, so I'm not even going to try. I think that's a regularly occurring pattern. And as you get older and things get more challenging and your old methodologies of handling them don't work the same, you end up beating yourself up worse. So I don't know. I mean, obviously, I'm also taking a young person, they're 4 to Children's Mercy, so I believe in their team and their staff and stuff. But I also think that there can be some structural things that need to go on, and also checking what the young person thinks about themselves and working on that at the same time as any symptomology you might have.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. If there are any other questions on ADHD, it's meant to be our whole topic for the whole time. I'm always open to, and I'm going to post anything that anybody wants later on. What we tend to do, I'm not going to make you guys get on camera, is introduce ourselves and then share what's going on with our family, and then try and do some support, and we'll walk ourselves around the TV and in the room. You guys want to go first? All right. Yep. We'll go this way.
Okay.
State your name so they can at least, you guys can hear them when they talk, right?
My name is Karen. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
My son Nick is a high school sophomore, and he went through the Renew outpatient program he graduated in October. And he just expressed the desire to come to the group aftercare tonight. And we've been to a couple of the parent sessions, but we're like, well, we'll go down and hang out with Jason. And this topic is actually really interesting to me because I too have wondered over the years if this is something we are also dealing with. And like I said to Jason, I feel like so many kids are dealing with it. But Nick predominantly deals with, anxiety and then a lot of depression. So that's kind of our big focus right now. But doing better since he went through the program here, and it's just kind of day by day.
Okay. So let me look. I'm gonna start with Susana because I know I'm that, and she's eating because that's a great time to catch somebody. And if I look like I'm paying attention somewhere else, I am listening, but I'm trying to find. Enough of you have asked this question. I want to throw up a command compliance kind of flow chart, which I think also speaks into both your senior and the patterns that go with ADHD and any other challenge. I think they're actually playing into society right now. So I'm going to pull that up while I'm listening to Susana. Just say who you are and how we can support you tonight.
Yeah. My name is Susana. I have my son Elton, who's a junior in high school, just completed the program at Renew a couple of weeks ago. And he deals with depression and anxiety, some PTSD as well. And then I have Lucia, who's also a junior in high school, who deals with some anxiety and I think some ADHD issues. So that's our family.
Any specific things you wanted to bring up?
I am perhaps a question I would ask Jason is specifically with Lucia. It took me not with Elton. I knew some of the issues because of some of his history. Some of what he was dealing with was not necessarily unexpected. Elton is adopted and has kind of had some trauma early in childhood. But with Lucia, it took me a very, very long time to figure out what was happening to her. And it's just a couple of things that have happened in the last year have kind of clued me in, but it's taken me so long. And during that time, I think that our relationship was deteriorated a lot because I did not understand what was happening. So I am trying to rebuild that trust, and it is hard to come from her.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I just feel like she tries to close things off, and it's critical. It's critical to rebuild their relationship on all kinds of fronts. One of those fronts being, I want to understand a little bit more what's going on with you so we can get you some help.
Yeah, that's so I think I shared, we're starting this parent-child interactive therapy today, and they reminded me of some good stuff that I used to really like, that we're supposed to mirror our kids in playtime. Like there should be some playtime that they lead, and these are concepts that are taught for like childhood stuff, and they haven't translated much into how we interact with our adolescents, with our teens, kind of thing. What does mirroring a teen look like? And I would say my natural tendency, I actually had a doctorate in logistics. I asked him to analyze my voice and how I talk to people at some point at a presentation. And he's like, because he was telling other people where they were from and really close. It was amazing. And so he finally is just like, you're kind of a chameleon. You talk in the way that people best listen to, and you pay attention to, like you can tell, and it changes a little bit when you're talking to a person, you're reflecting. And I think we lose that with adolescents, and we forget to let them lead. And so, or they're doing stuff that we're like, playing guitar is not, it's hard to come in and mirror that.
Did you say that again?
It's just hard to do that, and where we're not leading their baseball teams and stuff like that. And so, Susana, one of the things we gave was those conversation cards, and it's almost 100% for that. So you're not trying to teach, you're not trying to push, you're just listening to them describe themselves and doing it. And then, so that's one of those things that it's for. I think driving in the car, the training I got today reminded me, like, okay, so what does it mean not to lead even when you're playing? Okay, so it means you're not asking them a bunch of questions, because you asking questions pulls them off of wherever their own head is. It's you not judging or evaluating whatever it is they happen to be doing. And then it's trying to participate in some way, shape, or form. And so, like, my daughter now reads books that I don't really want to read, and somewhat just time-wise, but she's now telling me stories about these books, and I just listen and I reflect back enough where she knows I heard what she said. And I'm picking up some pieces, and I've got one of them I'm trying to read because it's a really important one. But I think some of that is that reflecting, that mirroring, that somehow finding an area where you can step into their world. But stepping into their world means accepting it's not yours, and you have no influence over it, and you have no lead over it, and you have to be okay with the ambiguity that they're okay with. And so that would be my recommendation in that case, is to rebuild that. It doesn't have to be everything. Obviously, you still have to be mom and everything else, but can you find those moments of time where you get to go do that and they're leading you? Biggest change in my relationship with my parents, and we had a good relationship, but I went off to college and we at least got into a pattern of calling once a week. They started struggling with my little sisters and started asking my opinion because I was in a psychology program. I mean, it just completely turned us into friends, as opposed to, and they were still parents. I knew I could still call and share my stuff, but it changed that whole direction and how I thought about them. So you got to find some of those areas, even with a 16-year-old.
Yeah, and, as I hear you, I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and Julie and I work together, and I lead an organization. So there's a natural leader in me. So I just kind of lead whatever I am. It is in my DNA to lead. And so I think with her, that's very much a turnoff, especially because right now I'm trying to lead into finding solutions to the issue. And I think she doesn't want to be solved for.
It's a good way to think about it. And it's also that none of them want to feel like they're fixed. And even when they're going to end up really, really close to your values, they got to find their own. She's got to find her own right now. And that can't be just mimicking yours or having yours overpower a situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're very, very strong. The force is strong in you, young Padawan. And you've got to be able to tone that down for them to have room to breathe.
Yeah. Yeah. And to approach some of these situations without leading or without an agenda.
Yeah. They know when you have an agenda. They can sense it. Like, they can smell an agenda.
And I always do. That's the problem. So.
Huh?
He has a pen right now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
List Baker.
While she was eating, mind you.
Multitasking.
All right, I'm gonna pull it down, Nicole. I can now see you, and you're next, and I don't know how it lines up on your screens, but you're below Susana, so I'm gonna come to you and just say hi and let you introduce yourself and ask any questions you might have.
Okay, I'm Nicole, and I actually have twins. that are 12, just turned 12, and they both have it. We really haven't diagnosed it yet, but like you said, I can see the characteristics
Sticking
in
their head in
them.
the camera. Are they
Mhm.
sitting there with you? Yeah, there's. Is
No,
that a head?
that's my last one. My last one, thankfully, did not get it.
Okay.
He's more focused than all of us. So we were living like on the Kansas side. I had them in preschool right away, 2.5. They quit taking naps. They just, did their normal kid stuff, but overly hyper. And I
Yeah.
never gave them sugar. We drink water, milk. Still do that. They're always happy, go lucky. So we haven't done the depression or anxiety yet. They don't know how to turn it off. They have this thing with their hands. It's called baby hands, and they play with each other with it. That's starting to drive us nuts.
You have ADHD mixed with twin speak.
They did when they were toddlers, yes. Now
Oh.
they have speech therapy. Thankfully, Kansas had it, but they didn't know how to do, I guess, behavioral side of it with the ADHD. So they would have to separate them a lot. We have them in 2 different classes since they started preschool. So they've have different personalities, and they've been able to be on their own level, so we don't compare them.
Yeah, good.
Because I know my first one is outgoing. He does everything you're told. He likes to be, out there, out in the party, having fun. My second one's more of an introvert, so he backs off a little bit. He tries to observe and try to figure things out. He has maybe 1 to 2 friends. So, and they think he's weird because he has ADHD. So he's always singing to himself. He's hyper. He's moving a lot. But yeah, like I said, in Kansas, we tried to do, I guess, the questionnaires through the school. Every teacher would do it. We had a pediatrician, but they wouldn't really diagnose it. So I didn't know Children's Mercy would do it. So right now that they're 12, it's getting harder to get them to focus, to listen, to do their chores, to do their homework. And like you guys were saying about teenager-wise, we're getting there. So I want to be able to help them now before it gets too late. But my biggest question is it genetic? Because I think their dad had it when he was a kid. So
There's a genetic component to everything. And so, yes, it's not an actual ADHD. It isn't part of your genes and your genetics. It, not to say that, like, you can get some of the same symptoms with, say, a drug, a baby that was born, with drugs in the system and those kind of. There are other ways to get there, but it's highly likely it was genetic.
Okay. Yeah, because I know him when he was a kid. They put him on medication a lot, so he was a zombie. I guess they put him on Ritalin, the toughest drug back then. It just zonked him out the whole time. So,
and if he was on Ritalin and it made him kind of compliant or docile, it was ADHD. And then, but the challenge with Ritalin is it doesn't actually fix all the problems. It just gives you the ability to at least do things differently. But you still have to do things differently to be successful. I want to show you something that I think will make sense.
Okay.
And this, for everybody, this command compliant thing. Let's see how this works. Share. Let me go.
Sure.
Pretty good.
Sure.
All right. Yeah, this will move. All right. So I'm gonna walk you through this. You guys can see it up there, right? The parent gives a command. And then this is how interactions work. All right. Parent gives a command. Is there compliance? Yes. Well, then we just move on to other interactions. They may be other commands, doesn't really matter, but it's usually a positive direction if they choose to comply with that command. On the other hand, if it's no, and you then get to this place, well, they didn't do it, so we repeat the command. All right. This is actually research based in that most parents, most people will go through this loop 3 to 7 times. So they give the command, they get Compliance, no. All right, they come back, they give the command. All right, and then the thing is, after 3 to 7, depending on your own, patience level or what have you, you go into a threaten. You say this is going to happen, and you still give the command, and you look at compliance, and if it's no, and this loop repeats itself, sometimes the threat works, and you're back to other interactions, but you've also frustrated yourself some. No, then you go on. If you go through that loop a couple times, you're then in a quandary. All right, and you either give up and you don't actually ask this, you let go of your command, you acquiesce, and your young person learns something, or you move to force or aggression or something like this. Does this cycle, or anger? Like my wife does this with my 11-year-old a lot. She doesn't come down. She doesn't clear the table. She doesn't do it the right way. We go through this on, and both of them end up frustrated, and it's damaging their relationship. So does this make sense to people? Have you seen this in your lives?
We just get sections 3 through 7, 3. I go straight from no to we're gonna get it right.
Go right to a threat.
We get to a moral agreement pretty quick.
So, Nicole, that would be my concern with your guys as there's more expectations on them as they hit middle school, is that non-compliance is not always it's not like a conscious, like, I am purposely defying you. That's oppositional defiant kind of thing. It's more of like, I didn't quite catch all of that, and I was paying attention to this. Oh, and you wanted me to pick up my socks? I didn't hear that, and it could have caused a battle. I would just be watching for that, because if they get into middle school and they're distracted, and then they don't get a concept, that it's going to end up becoming them beating themselves up a little bit. I do think I was sharing earlier. I'm going to go back to my slides for a second, but this is a book from a publisher I like. It's called 6 Super Skills for Executive Functioning, because you're actually wanting them to develop that frontal lobe more and sooner. I think if you have options like of a chess club and not just a chess club, because they also need to use some of that energy. I mean, they flat out have more energy than other people. So soccer, I play racquetball because it's really the only sport, or skiing. There's a high level of, a good chance of me being able to get hurt in either one of those things, which makes me, if I know I'm going to get hurt, I attend differently than if I know I'm not going to get hurt.
Mhm.
There you go. I mean, I put my kids into, I'm going to post that on a link too, but, or at least a way to get it. We've put our kids into Taekwondo very early. It was trauma. The youngest one has ADHD. The other one has some anxiety already in their life. And all of it, we think, is the structure, the routine, the repetition. An amazing staff has been already really beneficial to all my kids for 4 very different reasons. And so finding something like that would be meaningful also. That's at least they've got the 2 of them to count on. I do want to show you something, as I think you came in after I showed this screen. There are some wonderful advantages to ADHD. I was a better youth minister. I'm a better counselor because of the intuitiveness and the sensitivity to things. And if you don't let your sense of humor, my mom saved me. I had a sense of humor, but it was biting. It was mean when I was younger because I was smart on top of it. My mom convinced me it was not a good idea. She told me I was becoming mean, and my sense of humor turned into instead of damaging. All right. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Keep listening. I don't know, my screen keeps changing on me, but I'm gonna go with Julie. Julie, are you still with us?
I am. Thank you. Thank you so much. And shout out. Thank you to Susana for letting me know about this group. I have high school seniors, also twins. They each have anxiety disorders. One of them manifests in an eating disorder, and she was hospitalized with organ failure at Children's Mercy in March of 2020. The other has amplified pain syndrome, also anxiety at the root of that. So what we are, now that they are seniors in high school, the reason I'm here is because I want to do whatever we can. At this point, they're seen by medical doctors, psychiatrists, therapists, nutritionists at Children's Mercy. They take a family-centered approach, and so this idea that ADHD might be something that one of the girls is dealing with is new to us. And with college coming, I want to do what we can to set her and them both up for success, knowing that we're getting ready to transition. Probably, adult care is around the corner. What can we do at this point while they still are in pediatric care, where the family-centered approach to care is still something that is available to us? And so I have a lot of, my own concerns right now about, I'm feeling the pressure of time and doing as much as we can right now before, before it's sort of completely out of our hands as parents.
Yeah, I appreciate that. If there's if somebody's doing eating disorder, they're already trying to control their world, which means there's some, to go back to some of our language, that advisor is which is, and we use a model called DNAV, which is based on acceptance commitment therapy for adolescents. But the concept is that we all have amygdalas. We all have a fight or flight response, and we all try to somehow manage that. In animals, every creature has this amygdala, has this fight or flight mechanism. The thing is, a lion doesn't, for some reason, the lion doesn't catch the whatever animal it's chasing, the gazelle. It doesn't spend the next 2 days beating itself up and saying it's a failure. That is a human trait, and that words and logic and not really good logic, but logic that we just use to get through life, to build rules and stuff for, they start mixing together, and it's really dangerous inside their own heads. That would be my biggest concerns. And then, and if you're worried that might be when a program or some kind of therapeutic help that's not just medical doctor help might be useful. If you think you've got all that other stuff under control, I think a very concrete thing that is helpful is a really good time management system. Going deep into a Stephen Covey but actually making them go through the structure of a time management system, and learning how to do that. Because if they learn how to do that, then they're teaching, as they learn to do it, they're teaching their brain to do it normally, and they're learning a really useful skill of how to judge their time in college, and how to allot, and how to track it and put it down, and look at their calendars and reminders and all those other things that their brain doesn't do naturally. So, I mean, it's like chess is a precursor to that. Time management might be more useful. That's just the kind of the first thought that comes there. you're trying to strengthen that executive functioning.
Mhm.
And time management is one of those ways that you can strengthen that executive functioning, because you're thinking through different options, you're actually putting them out, you're giving them, prioritizing them, and then you're following through, hopefully.
That's really insightful, because what happens is she feels easily overwhelmed, and then avoidance happens, and it's all begins to snowball. And she's a very smart kid. She has, was an A student until the eating disorder manifested, and then, all of this. She doesn't, if without that structure, she avoids, and then it will go all the way from A to F in no time.
Yep. Those that have been through my program know that, I mean, I talk about he's still my best friend. I mean, I literally had lunch with him yesterday. But he failed, or was close to failing out of his freshman year, and ended up having to change schools, and he's gifted level intelligence. And after living with me for a year, he's like, I need some help on how you structure your stuff. And so what he wanted was my time management, the system that I use, the binder. And he went, I mean, I think he got a 4 after he put that structure in place. He had to have something from the outside help him build that structure. Do it from the inside.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Let's see, Jess, are you? Want to give you a chance if you wanted to introduce yourself or share or ask any questions. And actually, we've got other parents here. It's supposed to be a team support group. I end up talking a lot. I'm just kind of used to it. Anybody else have any feedback for Nicole or Julie? All right.
I can tell Julie that I have a daughter who is in her freshman year of college, and we thought she was going to be the one that was our problem child, and no communication. High school, whatever. Good active in the track and field.
But it's not true. Don't you talk about it.
Majority.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Very selling at it. Elected a position to chair 2 or 3 different things.
Transition from high school to college, I'm seeing kids are allowed to rebuild themselves and they find their confidence and start anew. It's encouraging. I mean,
that's a great story. I do think there are we don't give our kids times to start over.
right.
And I hated it at the time, but my parents moved me from my elementary, so I moved into a new 7th grade. It was kind of a second year to move into a small town where everybody had lived. I mean, they all knew each other, and I'm moving in from the outside, but I got to remake who I was from an elementary kid into junior high. And then my parents moved me again after my sophomore. My dad was a minister, so these were they were planned moves, but I mean, I can remember instead of having it happen when I went off to college, I made this decision. I'm going to actually try and be a good student. I'm going to be involved in these kind of things when I went to this new school. And I'm not going to be the class clown I was at the last school, because I needed to entertain myself just to get through the day. So I changed those things. And I did the same when I went off to college. I'm like, I want to grow in these 4 areas. And I purposely put myself into places. And so I'm just, from the outside as a parent, you can still put some of those things in front of them now. But I love that story, because there's also this whole, do they agree with your values? Do they make sense? Do your values actually apply to their lives? And then they get off by themselves to make their own choices. And they actually get to live whatever they think they have in their head, as long as they've got something in their head. I mean, the identity challenges I see are kids that have nothing there. They don't have any values. They're fighting their parents' values. They're not putting their own in place because of whatever reasons. And they're just lost. I mean, they just don't know who they are or who they want to be. And they just keep avoiding things until it's I don't know, it's sad. But
It sounds like a lot of us have high schoolers, and I'm telling
Yeah.
you, those high schools are a tough place to be right now. We're seeing it. And I just want out of it. It's like, you hate to want to fast forward your life, but I've just seen it. It's like, oh my God.
I would also say about, and I'm Todd, by the way, Karen's husband, Nick's our son, he's sophomore. He went through this program, like you said earlier, in October. And when we first started bringing him here, he wouldn't come in the room. And not he opened the door and wanted to come here. So if you're newly acquainted to this program, all I can say is let it have a little bit of time to take root and meet your son or daughter wherever they're at. One of the things that I felt early on and my wife and I are just the opposite. I don't literally beat him in submission, but I want to encourage him through just, good old fashioned values that put your boots on and go to work and deal with it. And my wife's not that way, but I've learned over the last 3 or 4 months to meet him where he's at, because the approach that I used to have with him was, what's the problem today? That is, I found that is not very productive. And over the last 2 months or so, our relationship is probably better than it has been in the past. And, just give it a chance to work. It may seem kind of foreign to you right now, but the little minds go quick, and typically they know what we're going to ask before we ask it, and they've already got to calculate things. So give it time. It does change. Yeah, that's really all I've got.
Thank you, Todd.
Yes, sir.
Jess, are you with us? Do you want to introduce yourself and share anything? I'm assuming they got caught up with their young people or whatever. Anybody else? Any questions? Any parting thoughts? Suzanne, I know you have one. I can sense it. You're always.
I am just kind of processing all of it, and to me, a hard thing is just to watch the kids really struggle and not get into the place where I lead and problem solve. I'm decently good at both of those things. And so, and the more scared I am, the more concerned I am as I see them struggle, the more I do that. So I'm just processing everything that everybody's saying and just thinking about how do I implement this in my life. So no particular thought other than just pondering all of this. And
So,
as you told me, creating that space for them to.
Yeah. So my wife and I were on this training. We're getting ready to work, and there's a lot of it goes against my wife's natural tendencies, and she can get overwhelmed with trying to do the right thing all the time. So a little bit of, I don't know, it's not really perfection, but trying really too hard, quite frankly. Yep. And I'm like, they're telling us to do this 5 minutes a day, just the consistency of every day in this case, this play, this mirroring kind of thing, and not asking the questions for that 5 minute block. So don't think you have to tone who you are down 100% all the time, but it's pick some times and some areas and just whatever, especially if it's something that's a spark in her or that she loves, and you can just go do that with her and let her lead, but just for smaller doses. I think that's easier to think about it that way.
I appreciate that, because I am a kind of type A, go all the way, do it fast, do it really well. So that becomes paralyzing because it's just too much to change. So that's very helpful advice, Jason. Thank you.
Yeah, so Stephen Covey puts it in if you're going to take on any of his habits, it's you should try that singular habit for 3 weeks, not all 7 of them at one time. When you get good at one, then you go on to the next one. And I think that's a good way to even think about almost all of this. I'm talking to my own self here. I've got 4 very different kids, and 2 or 3 of them are challenging. So, and the other one I can want to keep on some kind of straight and narrow path. So, I live this every single day, and I lose my temper, and they drive me batty, and I don't get it right. I'm much better with all your guys' teenagers than I'm my own. I am so much happier with teenagers.
Until yours are teenagers.
Yeah, we're gonna see. We're gonna see. I don't know what it's gonna do to me.
Like grandparents. He said, "Oh,
Oh yeah.
Oh right, you do get.
I do sit up. I'm like, yeah, that 3 hours sucked, but
That's you go. Yeah.
please move on. Yeah. Nicole, anything else? Got you there. Got anything coming up? I do. Oh, you bet. Bye, Susana.
Bye, everybody.
Do this on the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays. I am gonna pick some topic that, honestly, after running through 350 plus families, these topics have come up enough that I want to be able to speak on them, and they're not quite big enough to be part of an intensive short-term program. So I want to visit them in different formats, and then always just continue being a support for the community. So we'll do this on the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays, with whoever shows up. That's what I do. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it very much. Like I said, Susana mentioned that we work together and we compare notes about our teenagers, and she mentioned this to me. And so, one thing I didn't realize until tonight in this hour that I've been listening and sharing is that how helpful it is to talk to, I mean, it sounds silly maybe, but how helpful it is to hear others' stories in the community, because I feel like we've been dealing with everything in such a, in such our little bubble, and it feels kind of like you're alone in it. And so anyway, I just appreciate everyone sharing, and this has been great. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, Julie.
I found that the minute you open yourself up to sharing, you realize how many people all around you are going through similar things. Yeah. It's everywhere. Every
kid, almost all of them, say that the thing that helped them the most was that they had a group of other people struggling, maybe not exactly, but at least as intensely as they were. And it allowed the sharing, and that realization allowed them to be willing to try some of the things we were suggesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I concur. Well, if we got nothing else, I'm going to call it a day. I have work to do tonight, still running the place, and got to get something to the printer tonight. All right. So I'm going to still be going for a little while longer, but thank you all. Please come and join us. Just in general, if there's other topics, the website, either boldparenting.online or even going through Anxiety Center, KC, and the Adolescent Parent Resources, I've tried to post some other topics and other things, especially on the advisor and avoidance. If you're still wondering how those play into things, there's some good talks on there, or I think they're good talks. It's a lot like this, though. This is who I am. This is how I talk. So it's a lot like this. But thank you all for joining. We'll hopefully see some of you in the future.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
Bye.